It is said that a person cannot know who he is until he knows where he has been. The same is true with political parties. Good morning, my name is Chris Kachouroff, and I'm a Virginia lawyer. But quite frankly, who I am is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we remember the message of our party and where it came from. Now is the time for us to choose a candidate in accordance with that message. Now is the time for us to choose a candidate who is consistent with our conscience. Speaking of which, do you all remember what it meant to have the conscience of a conservative? Do you? I do. It meant that you couldn't have economic freedom unless you had political freedom. That's right. Freedom of money and freedom of speech go hand in hand. And you can't be politically free if you're economically enslaved or dependent upon the government. You see, the conscience of a conservative does not allow any of us to be political eunuchs. It does not allow that because liberty is a powerful message of opinion, of the person, of property, and the right to use your property as you see fit. The conscience of a conservative, my friends, tells us that this same concept of liberty applies to the nation as a whole in that old world order concept known as sovereignty. Sovereignty, the right to assume among the powers of the earth the separate but equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle. It is that very sovereignty that prohibits us from invading other countries because, after all, we recognize that other countries, big or small, rich or poor, have the right to exist among the powers of the earth, just as we do. It's not a principle of might makes right. And finally, that conservative conscience admires the wisdom of the Founding Fathers, and it reveres the Constitution as though it were holy writ. Are these extreme ideas? Well, I remind you also of Barry Goldwater. And what did he say in that convention in '64? Let me remind you. Extremism in defense of liberty is no vice. Hear, hear. Likewise, moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. My friends, we face a very, very important political question today. It is whether we will embrace these extreme principles of liberty and self-government, or whether we choose to abandon the principles of the American Revolution and confess that the Constitution is irrelevant. There are plenty of people that are willing to centrally plan our lives because they don't think we can do it ourselves. In fact, they're telling us that we can suffer a little more government intrusion in our lives, that we can suffer a little bit of a loss of our freedom for security. Well, I ask you, do you remember the Founding Fathers and what they said? He who trades a little freedom for security deserves neither. Neither. Well, they're also taxing us more. We have a weak dollar, a dollar that buys less, and it's got another hidden tax. It's called inflation. And who does that affect the most? Our seniors who live on a fixed income. And I was just reading on the internet yesterday, in New York City, retailers are accepting the euro instead of the dollar. Can you believe it? The euro. What happened, folks, when the dollar was as good as gold? Gold. Well, I would suggest to you that we've just been printing paper money because we have a central bank that believes it can do something that heretofore has never been accomplished in the time of man, which is to make paper act like gold. It ain't gonna happen. We can't do it. We are squandering our inheritance. We are squandering our heritage and stealing from our posterity. All the while, we've let Congress slip into the ant-heap of socialism. Why? Why has this happened? Why have we allowed this? Well, I'm going to tell you. We haven't allowed it. There have been a few people who have cloaked themselves with a mantle of conservative. And as conservatives, improperly so called, they have changed the definition. What is that definition? The definition is this: hold the line in the place where the last liberal moved it. Retain power over principle. Remember conservative, remember Republican, 1980. Ronald Reagan sought to abolish the Department of Education. It was on our party platform, wasn't it? Remember? What happened in the year 2000? It was removed from the Republican Party platform. And not only was it removed, The Department of Education's budget was increased by $300 million when, the year before, they couldn't account for or lost $220 million. We have a fiscal burden of $440,000. We've been told to be compassionate conservatives, as though conservatives aren't compassionate with their message of liberty and freedom and limited government. We have been told that we should embrace faith-based welfare. My friends, I'm a hardcore Christian. I am so far to the right that only Jesus and Robert E. Lee are on my right, and everybody else is a communist because they're on my left. But I got news for you. There's no faith to it. It's all tax-based. It's wrong. Now, under this mantle of conservatism, we have experienced the single largest increase in the size of the federal government since the time of LBJ, and Republicans and conservatives have been at the helm. Silence. Ah, yes, your conscience. I am not asking you to vote on February 12th for a particular candidate. I'm asking you today to vote for a particular candidate. There is a man here who is a true champion of the Constitution. There is a man who is a true conservative. He's a doctor, pro-life, delivered over 4,000 babies. He is against all forms of socialized medicine. He practices what he preaches. He doesn't dine at the federal trough of Medicare and Medicaid payments from his patients. This man has been defined as the taxpayer's best friend by the National Taxpayers Union, repeatedly named the taxpayer's hero by the Citizens Against Government Waste. You all know the Club for Growth? The Club for Growth is a very conservative economic think tank, and they've said that this man's record on economics, regulation, and political speech is, in a word, superb. During 10 years in Congress, for some of you who don't know a congressman's term, that's 20 years. During his 10 terms in Congress, this man has never, and I mean never, voted for a tax increase. He has never voted for an unbalanced budget. He has never voted for a deficit spending. He has never voted to increase the size of the congressional branch or its power. He has never voted for a congressional pay raise. And he doesn't take part in that lucrative congressional federal pension system. Why? Because none of us have access to it. And it's not fair. He thinks it's stealing. Principle? This man has never voted against the Second Amendment. He's pro-gun. This particular individual is against amnesty. He's against birthright citizenship for illegal aliens. And he does not believe in welfare for illegal aliens because they're hemorrhaging our hospitals, because the illegals are coming in and getting treated for free, and you and I are paying for it. We don't need a man with CEO experience to work in the government. We don't need somebody with a cadre of administration officials. We only need one man who can say no. That's it, just one man. One man who will look at the new entitlement programs that come about and say no. One man who will cancel out the old programs that do violence to the Constitution, that pose an unnecessary burden on the taxpayer, and get rid of them. We only need one man who will say to himself, I am not interested in streamlining the government. I am not interested in making this government more efficient. For I intend to cut its size. Folks, I want to tell you something else. We need a man such as this who will lead our military. So who am I talking about? Well, you kind of already know. But I want you to hear the words of a fringe candidate, a long shot candidate who has endorsed this man during all of his, most of his re-election bids to Congress. His fringe candidate, his name is Ronald Reagan. He said, Ron Paul is one of the outstanding leaders fighting for a stronger national defense. As a former Air Force officer, he knows well the needs of our armed forces, and he always puts them first. We need to keep him fighting for our country. Yes, folks, Ron knew Ron. And who are we to disagree with Ronald Reagan? Barry Goldwater Jr. endorsed this man for president because the message he carries is flawless. The message that he carries is seamless throughout. I asked Barry Goldwater Jr., why did you endorse Ron Paul? And he said, because the other candidates are just wannabes. Ron Paul is the one who's closest to my father. I urge you just today, purify that conservative conscience that you have. I ask you to cast a vote for liberty, cast a vote for somebody who will restore the republic, cast a vote for the only presidential candidate here that the Founding Fathers would have claimed as one of their own, Ron Paul.